So in this quadratic equation, A is -3, B is -12, and C is -16. Raise your hand if you think this is a smile. Who thinks it's a frown? Right, because A is negative. Good. Whenever A is negative, it opens down like a frown. So the first true answer is B. All right, which one is the y-intercept, A, B, or C? Who says A? B? C? It is C. So which one is true, C or D? C. All right, axis of symmetry. This is where we struggle. So the equation is x equals, and it's the opposite of B. So if B is -12, it's going to change to a +12. And that's divided by 2 times A. And what is A? -3. So that means that in your calculator, you're going to divide 12 by -6, which should give you x equals -2. So the next true answer would be E. All right, last but not least, which one is all real numbers, the domain or the range? Who says it's the range? Who says it's the domain? It is the domain. So if you selected B, C, E, and H, you selected the right answers. All right, let's go to our notes. All we have left are some tables. And then we're going to practice on our whiteboards again for a little bit. So we are on page 12. Okay, so we talked about looking at tables yesterday. So when it's asking you to solve by using a table, there's 2 different things we're going to look for. And I don't know, can you hold up your page real quick so I can see it? I just want to see what it looks like. All right, so you got a little bit of space above it. So right above at the very top of page 12, I want you to write the 2 things that we're going to look for to find our solution. The first thing is when y equals 0. That's the first hint that we have found a solution, is when y equals 0. So whenever y equals 0, when y equals 0, that means that the x value is the solution. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my pen. I always think about buying a real one, but those are like $100, so we got to do what we can do with this Temu one. So when y equals 0, x is a solution. Okay. However, that's only when you're looking at a table, it's harder to find that when it's a decimal. So the second thing that we look for is when your y value changes sign. So in other words, if it goes from being positive to negative or from a negative to a positive. So those are 2 hints to help us know that that we've hit a solution in our graph. So do you see how this says f of x? F of x is the same thing as y. So we can actually rename this column or this row as y, because that's the same thing. F of x means y. So I want you to look in this row and tell me, do you find any zeros in this row? Do you see any zeros in this row? Yes or no?
Yeah, there were 2 zeros.
There's 2 zeros. So that means that this would be my first solution. And this is my second solution. So that's the easiest way to find your solution. It's just looking for when the y value is 0. All right, the second method would be, excuse me, looking for a sign change. So first thing we're going to do, remember this is y, is we look for a 0. And there aren't any zeros in this example. So now we're going to look at the sign. So we start off with a positive 3, and then it switches to a negative 3. Does everyone see that? How immediately I had a sign change. So what that tells me is that my first solution is somewhere between those numbers, between the x values. So it's between negative 3 and negative 2. It could be negative 2.5, negative 2.7, negative 2.999, but it's not negative 2, it's not negative 3, it's a number in between because we had a sign change for our y value. All right, so now let's go back looking at our y. So this is still negative, still negative, still negative, and then it switches to a positive. So that tells me I have another solution. And what is that solution between? What 2 numbers?
Between 2 and 3.
Not 2 and 3. So we got to look at where did the sign change? The sign changed right here.
Between 1 and 2.
Yeah, so my second solution would be between 1 and 2, 2 and 1, whichever way you want to write it. Any questions about how to look at the table? All right, and then our last question, I want you to try to do example 10 on your own. First, you're going to see if you can find a 0 in your y value. So these are y. And if you don't find a 0, I want you to look at the sign change. Look for your sign change. And then when your sign changes, I want you to look directly above and circle the x values where it changed. All right, so does anybody want to take a guess on what my first solutions would be?
Between negative 3 and negative 2.
All right, so let's look at that. So we have a positive 7, a positive 2, then it switches to a negative. So this is my first solution. So we don't know what it is exactly. So starting on Friday, we're going to move on to factoring. So we started with graphing. Is that Friday? Yeah, Friday. we're going to move on to factoring. So we started with graphing, and now we're going to do, next is factoring, and the last is a quadratic formula. So when you're looking at a table, though, we can't find it, but we know it's somewhere between -3 and -2. Now I need somebody else to tell me where is my second solution. Bear. Between 0 and 1, good. Because this is a -2, this is a -1, but now the 2 switches to a positive. So this would be my second solution. And that would be between 0 and 1. Yes, Sandra?
Is your solution always going to be on your x?
Yes, that's a good question. Solutions are always the x values. Solutions are x-intercepts, x values. It is never y. Good question. All right. So, just a reminder, homework 2 is due this Friday. So everybody go to the back, pick up a whiteboard, eraser, and a marker. So we are going to do some practice for tomorrow's skills check.